Do you, David Anwar, in terms of gun safety or gun legislation, do you think changes have to be made there?
I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. If you have a good idea, let's work together as Americans and come to a compromise. Because in politics, if no one side ever wins, it's always through compromise that changes happen.
Democrats and Republicans both have children, so they both should be able to understand what it would be like to lose their children, and they both should come to a compromise and have compassion for these people. They need to jump over whatever divide they have.
So because we live in an age now where people are finally transcending the false choice of Republican versus Democrat, because in case you didn't know, Donald Trump is not a Republican. If you think Donald Trump is a Republican, he just isn't a Republican. Because we're transcending this age now, where the false illusion of choice Republican versus Democrat paradigm has collapsed, and the American people can no longer be led like lambs, like sheep to the slaughter by the Republicans and the Democrats, the establishment that always used the two parties to get its way, that same establishment is now their latest talking point, and it's really been around since Trump got elected. The latest talking point is that we all have to put down our parties. It's not about Republican or Democrat anymore. Now it's about we all just have to come together as Americans. So it's crazy to hear these students who were, who survived the school shooting in Florida just a few days ago. It's creepy to see them so eloquently putting forward the establishment's talking points. It's very creepy to hear them so eloquently putting forward the establishment's talking points. And I do think it's sad. I think it's sad that there was this terrible tragedy where 17 school students were killed, and it's sad that people who have a political agenda, they are using these dead children, and you see it every mainstream news report you hear now. They're using dead children to push a sick, twisted, irrational political agenda. That's truly sickening. So it is a little creepy. It's a little creepy to hear, this interview where those two students were just so eloquently putting forward the establishment's talking points. And yes, they do want us to come to a compromise. That's the whole thing now. It's not about Republican or Democrat anymore. We have to come together and make a compromise. Because don't you care about the dead children? Well, if you cared about the dead children, you wouldn't call for gun control, because guns don't kill people. Okay, just like trucks don't kill people. You can't call for a ban on guns when you can just as easily hop into a truck and run a bunch of poor kids over. It would have been just as easily, in many cases it's just as effective or even more effective than guns. Look at Nice, France. Look at what happened in Sweden. Okay, people in a giant truck plow through a crowd of people and dismember bodies. And a lot of times the death toll is higher, way higher, than in mass shootings with guns. Because the truth is there are many ways to effectively kill people, unfortunately, and guns are not the problem. So it's very sick. It's very sick to use dead children to call for a ban on guns when guns is completely irrelevant when it comes to mass murders. Just like trucks aren't the cause. Just like pressure cookers aren't the cause, as was the case in the Boston Marathon bombing when the guy used a pressure cooker bomb. Focusing on guns is not the problem, but it's very sad and it's very sick to see some of these, some people using the dead children to push a completely irrational and unjustified policy. So stop using dead children, guys. It's very sickening. Stop it. I hate to come out and be so loudly and proudly Second Amendment after a tragedy like this, but unfortunately when you have Democrat and liberal politicians pushing an irrational and sick agenda, using dead children to push a political agenda, we as champions of self-defense have no choice but to exercise ideological self-defense and push back against the aggressive liberal anti-gun agenda. So we have nothing to be ashamed of. We are champions of self-defense, whether it's saving someone who's being robbed, mugged, or raped, or if it's defending ourselves from an offensive liberal agenda trying to use dead children to take guns, we have every right to be loud and proud about the Second Amendment and the right to self-defense, even in the wake of a terrible school mass murder. We're not ashamed after a mass truck murder rampage to drive our trucks. We shouldn't be ashamed after a mass shooting to love and champion self-defense. We are not aggressors. We are not bullies. But the liberal Democrat politicians who use dead children are bullies. The Second Amendment trigger t-shirts are now available. Get one for yourself. Loudly and proudly defend your passion for the Second Amendment. Put a link to these shirts in the description below. Take care.